Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a newly buffed Pokemon in the Open Master League, and that is Zamazenta. Zamazenta's fast move Ice Fang did get an increase in energy generation this season, and honestly, this is probably one of my most anticipated Pokemon to try out from this entire balance patch. With nearly all of the best Master League Pokemon being weak to Ice, like Zygarde, Enamorus, Yveltal, and Rhyperior, I'm very excited to see what Zamazenta can do. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a look at Zamazenta in the Open Master League. Hopping into the first match, leading Zamazenta into Enamorus. Ice Fangs will add up quite a bit. Opponent safe switches into a Palkia, and I am going to respond with Zacian. Zacian, I did decide to run Wild Charge and Close Combat. I felt that Wild Charge was a must for this team, considering that Zamazenta really doesn't like Ho-Oh. Not having Play Rough does make this Palkia matchup quite a bit worse though. Palkia is going to land back-to-back Aqua Tails, and now that they have thrown all their energy, I'm going to start debuffing myself with Close Combat. Close Combat is going to land. Unfortunately, I'm going to be short of a third Close Combat here. Close Combat number 2 is going to be shielded. My opponent will get the farm down, but I can bring in my own Palkia and farm them down before they're able to make a Spatial Rend. In comes Enamorus. I'm going to switch into Zamazenta. In the back is Shadow Rhyperior. And this is exactly what Zamazenta was built to do. The Enamorus Rhyperior core was absolutely everywhere in High Elo Master League last season. And it's a core that is very, very weak to Ice. My opponent does get the 50-50 Breaking Swipe debuff, and I'm going to be firing back with the Crunch. Crunch is going to connect. I get a debuff as well, but that's a 1 HP survive from the Rhyperior. Breaking Swipe is going to land, and I'm going to bring back in the Palkia. Enamorus, Fly or Grass Knot, neither one is going to be enough to pick up a knockout here, so I can safely no-shield the first, make it to an Aqua Tail, and Enamorus is the most deadly Master League core breaker, but it is very frail. Aqua Tail connects, we get the farm down, and we're able to take the win. Moving to the next match, leading Zamazenta into Rhyperior. This is a matchup where Zamazenta does win all evens unless Rhyperior double Breaking Swipe baits and successfully lands a Rock Wrecker. Here, I'm just going to go straight for the Close Combat. Guarantee a one-hit KO, or if they shield, I can just switch out. They let it go. They're going to send in Duskmane and actually end up pivoting into Zacian. This team is ABA weak to Duskmane. It's also ABA weak to Fairy, but I felt like this was probably one of the better Zamazenta teams out there. It's a very awkward Pokemon to try and cover all of its weaknesses for, but at the same time, I feel that it has a lot of core breaking ability, so I do feel like using it does have some merit. So I will be met now with a Palkia firing off the Close Combat. Palkia is going to shield, and I am going to be firing off Close Combat number 2. This Close Combat is going to be no shielded. Opponent knows that could not have been a Play Rough, and now I'm just going to bring in Zamazenta, basically just to absorb energy from the opponent, and importantly, so I can reset the debuff on that Zacian. Bring in my own Palkia. By my count, they should be short, so I let it go. It is going to be the double resisted Aqua Tail. In comes Duskmane, and with a shield to hide behind and a pretty nice energy advantage, Palkia is in the driver's seat here. Opponent will commit the shield. They do have quite a bit of energy. I am going to shield, and then because I had lost track a little bit, I am actually going to send in Zacian here because I'm not in Dark Pulse range. This is a guaranteed win con for me because I can force them to Sunsteel, because if they go for the Dark Pulse, it does not KO, so I will get the farm down of the Duskmane and the farm down of the Palkia. Zacian on very low HP, able to pick up the win. Now, one thing I do want to note is Zamazenta and Zacian do have identical stats. They, of course, do have different typing, but they do have identical stats, which means that Zamazenta has some pretty sick stats. Here, I'm going to go for the Close Combat. Look at that damage. That is the same type attack bonus coming in clutch. I send in Zacian, they bank a ton of energy and bring in Rhyperior. Hoping, of course, that I'm not running Close Combat, but bad news for my opponent. I am running Close Combat on this Zacian. Zacian now going to actually grab a shield from the opponent. Unfortunately, my game stuttered quite a bit there, and I'm -4, so I'm just going to let this go. They go for the Rock Wrecker. That picks up the knockout. In comes Zamazenta. Zamazenta is going to get the farm down of the Rhyperior. So I do exit now with some energy. In comes the Palkia. I believe they have enough for a Spatial plus an Aqua Tail. I shield and I get it right. I called that they go for that Spatial Rend. Now this should only be an Aqua Tail, which is survivable for me. What do they have in the back? It's going to be a Duskmane. Duskmane uncomfortable, but I can fire off the Crunch, deal some very nice damage, and with this kind of health advantage, this is just a completely one endgame for me. My opponent Their win con is them firing off an outrage and me no shielding, so I will commit the shield. They go for Sunsteel, which tells me they do not have outrage, and that game is definitely over. Aquatail is going to be shielded, but the switch timer not yet available, so I can fire off Aquatail number 2. Down goes the Duskmane, and all they have left on their Palkia is just about 1 HP, so we're able to take the win. Zamazenta versus another Rhyperior. Opponent is now going to save switch into a shiny Zacian. What a flex. I decided to bank a bunch of energy and mirror with my own. Honestly, I don't really need switch advantage versus Rhyperior. I'm expecting, because the most common third with this team is actually Tapu Bulu, I'm expecting the third is Tapu Bulu, and if that's the case, then ideally I would want to put Zamazenta on their final Pokemon. I am going to be firing off the Wild Charge. Wild Charge is going to be shielded by opponent respecting a potential play rough, but of course I do not have it. They're not in a range where Wild Charge will knock them out, so now that they realize that I probably don't have it, they are going to let it go, and I'm just going to give up switch, because ideally I just want Zamazenta with a bunch of energy to handle this Bulu Rhyperior core. But that's a weird looking Tapu Bulu. That is a Xerneas, and that is a lot worse for me. As if it was Tapu Bulu, Ice Fangs would be hitting for super effective. So I could actually KO them with 2 charge moves, whereas the Xerneas is actually able to survive both close combats. Here, I'm going to farm up, switch into the Palkia, and catch what should only be a close combat. I was -4, so they had no reason to throw a Moonblast. I'm looking for the farm down, but that's going to be a 1 HP survive from the Xerneas, able to hang on. In comes Rhyperior. But having to give up that last shield due to my opponent getting the damage registration error does now potentially put me in a position where the Rhyperior might be able to sweep this endgame. Rhyperior with the perfect overfarm. Breaking Swipe is going to KO. In comes Zamazenta, and it all comes down to this. Can I survive a Rock Wrecker? Rock Wrecker is a clone of the move Blast Burn, and even resisted, it's just enough to KO. And unfortunately, we do lose the game. We have the Battle of Dogs in the next match. Zamazenta versus the shiny Zacian. I'm going to bank quite a bit of energy on Zamazenta, and now I'm just going to send in Zacian. Opponent is going to be firing off energy here. That works great for me. I am going to win the CMP tie because my Zacian does have the best buddy boost equipped. And that's a very clutch CMP tie win for me, as my opponent is forced to give up the first shield. They're not able to switch out just yet. They decide to stay in. I'm going to watch for a catch attempt, and there it is into Dialga, and I will be at the back-to-back close combats. I'm fully expecting if I throw both here, my opponent would just no shield. So instead, I'm going to save the energy, bring in Zamazenta, and go for a 1 shield farm down. Because all my opponent has stored right now is a Wild Charge or a close combat. And I have the same stats as Zacian, which means if a Wild Charge wouldn't KO a Zacian from here, it's not going to KO a Zamazenta. So I'm not in a range where I will get knocked out. Opponent goes for the Wild Charge. I'm able to tank that. I have back-to-back close combats loaded and ready to go. Close combat number 1 is going to pick up the knockout. In the back is a Veltal, and this game is done. Close combat into a Veltal is going to do some pretty significant damage. In comes the Palkia. I have the Wild Charge banked, so at this point my opponent knows there is no way to win this game, so just to save everyone time, they're just going to no-shield the Aquatail, and that will be game over. Tough lead in the next match is Zamazenta versus the Duskmane. Now this is a bad matchup, of course. They are able to resist Ice Fang, but I do outpace them, and I'm able to get the Crunch before they're able to get the Sunsteel. Opponent decides to shield. I am going to save switch into the Palkia, and I'm tanking whatever they throw. Even if it's an Outrage, I'm tanking it. It is just going to be a Dark Pulse. In comes a Shadow Dragonite looking for the farm down, and I get so close to the Spatial Rend, but I can't quite get there. I'm forced to settle for the Aquatail. Opponent was always just going to let it go anyway, so they will no shield. I bring in the Zacian, as Zacian will be able to resist the superpower and get a bit of an energy head start. And now they're going to send back in the Duskmane, and I see a potential win con here. I'm Wild Charging, and I'm sending in the Zamazenta, and I'm going to double shield farm this down, as Zamazenta with energy is far too scary. They go for the Dark Pulse. They're forced to switch out, otherwise I could have got the farm down. In comes Palkia. Palkia will go for the Aquatail right away, but I'm going to commit the shield. I know how hard close combat from Zamazenta hits, so I'm going to farm up to the back-to-back close combats, and let's put some pressure here on the opponent. Close combat is going to be shielded. I'm going for another close combat. This will come very close to KOing. If it doesn't KO, I think it'll be 1 quick attack range, but they live the quick attack. Oh no, that is actually not good. I didn't think they would survive that. In comes the Duskmane. It's a race to the move, but I get outpaced. And if I just stayed in with the Zamazenta, even at -4, then I could have got them low enough that I could have sniped with a quick attack, but I didn't, and unfortunately that is a narrow loss. Well, we get a chance for redemption in the next match. Zamazenta into Duskmane. Again, Duskmane, an uncomfortable lead for this team, but should still be a playable one. I'm going to fire off Crunch. Crunch is able to land. That does big damage. Now in comes Palkia, and again, I'm just going to let this go. I'm more than happy to use Palkia as a damage sponge. There's the Sunsteel Strike, and out comes a Yveltal. If I go for the Spatial Rend, it's an objective mistake here, because my opponent can just shield it and farm all the way down. But if I Aqua Tail, I can actually get to another move. So even if they no shield the first, it's fine. I can still get to a second move there. So in my view, that's just the objectively correct play in the situation, is always to double Aqua Tail right there. Now I can bring in the Zamazenta, and I'm just going to Ice Fang this all the way down. This poor Yveltal is about to give me so much energy. They're going to switch into the Duskmane. I get to farm up a ton of energy, and now pick up a knockout or grab the final shield with the Crunch. They let it go. Down goes the Duskmane. I'm still pretty healthy, and I still am pretty close to a charge move as well. What is their final Pokemon? It's going to be their own Zamazenta, and this should just be a completely winning position. Close combat is going to be shielded. There's the switch out into Zacian, and Zacian can tank any one move from Zamazenta. Zamazenta is going to be firing off its energy. This Zamazenta is on Iron Head. The other moves Zamazenta can learn are Iron Head and Moonblast. I do think there could be some situational merit to those moves, but I think Crunch Close Combat is overall going to be the superior moveset to run. Here, I do make it to the Close Combat. That's going to be knocking out the very low health Yveltal, and we're able to take the win. Zamazenta versus Yveltal, very good lead. Opponent is going to stay in for a little bit. They're going to save switch into Dialga. And this is where being a fighting type is actually really nice, because a close combat from a Zacian, Dialga lives it. Close combat from Zamazenta, no it does not. It just gets completely KO'd there, and that is the difference of the same type attack bonus multiplier. Moves hit a lot harder when they're the same type of the Pokemon that's throwing them. Zacian is going to have a great time in this matchup, tanking the Oblivion Wing and looking to pick up a knockout with a Wild Charge. Wild Charge is going to connect. Down goes Yveltal. In the back is Solgaleo. And even though Solgaleo and honestly the Psychic Steels in general are a bit difficult for this team to deal with, I still have a full health Palkia, so this should be a pretty comfortable win. Back-to-back Wild Charges, first one shielded, second one is not, and now I can send in the Palkia. And Palkia more than happy to absorb Psychic Fangs after Psychic Fangs in this matchup. They're going to fire off Psychic Fangs number 2, and again, that's just not going to be a problem for Palkia whatsoever. Palkia is going to make it to an Aqua Tail, and if they shield, I should be able to finish off the game with Zamazenta. Now, honestly, right here, I was a little curious to test Zamazenta's bulk. This is one of the earlier games I did with the team, so I no-shielded the Psychic Fangs, and that did not do a lot. Again, Zamazenta having the same stats as Zacian, it's dealing with some very, very good base stats here overall, and we are able to get a 2-shield flex. Bad lead in the next match, leading into Ho-Oh. I'm going to safe switch into Zacian, and my opponent is going to stay. So I can just fire off the Wild Charge. This will do a ton of damage. Wild Charge is going to connect, and that does get my opponent quite low. I am going to shield here. They're going to Sacred Fire. I'm expecting a switch out, but they stay, and here I make a crucial misplay. I should have just clicked the Wild Charge before they got the move. I could have done 4 on the move, would have been fine. But instead, now I'm down 2 shields. I'm way too low, and just about anything my opponent has in the back will be a problem. Going down 2 shields in the Master League, you're often not going to have a great time. I end up banking the Wild Charge here, sending in the Zamazenta. I go for the Crunch. It's caught onto an Annihilate in the back. So now we have the battle of the Master League fighting types. Something that, realistically, you wouldn't have expected to see in previous seasons, but the fighters are coming out to play just a little bit more. Unfortunately, barring an absolutely generational catch in a Palkia Mirror, in which my opponent can throw at any time, this game is just looking like a loss because they already have a Spatial Rend. I farm up and I don't get the prediction right, because it just would have been a blind guess there, because they can throw it at any time between when I enter the field and right before I make the Spatial Rend. So the game could have been a lot more playable if I didn't go down 2 shields. That was just entirely my fault. All right, we move into the final match leading into Solgaleo. Solgaleo, I'm very happy to play this out here, at least to start with. Tank a Psychic Fangs, go for a Crunch. Pretty much same plan as going up against the Duskmane, is you're just able to get some damage or grab an early shield, and then you can send in the Palkia. Palkia. More than happy to no shield here, as nothing they have can really hurt too much. They are going to go for the Psychic Fangs, and now they're going to bring out the bat as Dawnwing's Necrozma enters the field of play. I'm expecting a shield, so I will go for the Aqua Tail. Opponent actually does end up calling the bait. Not a bad bait call there. I am debuffed, which means that I would actually be in danger of being knocked out. So I will commit the shield and then immediately return fire with the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is shielded. I'm switching out into Zamazenta, basically just to try and get this Pokemon just a little bit lower. Zamazenta, I don't think is going to have a ton of value in this particular game. I'm going to try and sweep, if at all possible, with a ton of energy on Palkia, and with Zacian in comes Rhyperior. There's an attempt at a Peekaboo play onto Solgaleo, but Solgaleo has almost no fast move pressure here, and by them switching it in, I'm actually able to double up on Aqua Tails, and that gives me a guaranteed win condition. So the opponent, I mean, a Peekaboo play is quite impressive, but unfortunately they did overplay it just a little bit, and now I should just be in a 1 position, because Rock Wrecker plus the Mud Slaps after will not KO. I hesitate ever so slightly before the close combat to make sure that fast move damage registered first, and now close combat will get to connect. It will not KO. It actually ends up being a CMP tie, but whether it was or not, the game was still over because I had the move loaded on the Palkia. So Palkia, you can't even see its HP bar, but it still hangs on to deliver the knockout and secure the win. All in all, I think that Zamazenta moves from, unfortunately, a fringe spice pick at best before to now extremely usable anti-meta. As I mentioned at the start, so many of the best Pokemon that you're going to see again and again in the High Elo Master League are weak to Ice. So if you're going to have a new fast move on a Pokemon in the Master League, having it be an Ice type fast move is honestly about the best typing that you could ask for. So many of these Pokemon, I mentioned at the start, the Landorus of the world, Yveltal, Rhyperior, Tabubulu, and of course, probably the GOAT core breaker of Master League currently, Enamorus. They're all weak to Ice, and even though you are a fighter, you can actually fight back and win a lot of these matchups, even against stuff like Enamorus and Tabubulu in the 2-shield. But due to the fact that it's hitting most of those top meta threats for super or even double super effective damage with his fast move, I think we will see quite a bit more Zamazenta in a strong anti-meta role. To me, the thing that holds it back from being top meta is actually the fighting typing defensively does not offer a lot of strengths as far as the Master League meta goes. The main advantage that you really have as a fighter is, of course, the resistance to Sucker Punch. As long as you have shields to block Oblivion Wings from Yveltal, you're going to be in a pretty terrific spot in that matchup. But yeah, overall, I feel like that kind of sums up my thoughts and my review of Ice Fang Zamazenta. It is dramatically improved. Previously, the only time that I really saw any play was as a bit of a spicy core breaker for the Necrozma plus Dialga core, but now with Ice Fang, being able to take down top meta threats like Enamorus is honestly a pretty nice plus. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.